Sit with me for a second. Not like you're watching a video, like we're sitting next to each other, maybe in a quiet room, maybe in your car, maybe late at night when your phone is the only thing still awake with you. Let me ask you something, and answer honestly, even if it stings a little. Have you ever felt a woman slowly cool off toward you, without a fight, without a breakup, without a clear reason? One day she laughed more, she leaned in, she asked questions, and then nothing dramatic happened. But something changed. She still replies, she's still polite, she's still there. But the enthusiasm, the spark, the warmth that made you feel chosen, gone. And what makes this confusing, almost cruel, is that no one ever tells men this truth. Most women don't lose interest loudly. They lose it quietly. And if you're a man with self-esteem struggles, this hits even harder. Because instead of asking, what changed in the dynamic, you ask, what's wrong with me? That's where men spiral. They try harder. They explain more. They give more reassurance. They chase clarity. And without realizing it, they accelerate the very thing they're trying to fix. Here's the uncomfortable truth I want you to hear calmly, not dramatically. When a woman loses enthusiasm for you, it's rarely sudden. It's usually a psychological shift that began long before you noticed. And today, I'm going to explain exactly how that shift starts, so you can finally understand it instead of blaming yourself or guessing. 1. When her energy changes before her words. Here's something men are almost never taught. A woman's behavior will change long before her language does. She doesn't wake up one morning and decide, I'm done being interested. What actually happens is far more subtle and far more psychological. At first, she feels less curious. She still listens, but she stops leaning in emotionally. She still responds, but she stops expanding the conversation. She still shows up, but she no longer invests. And here's the key part most men miss. She often doesn't consciously realize what's happening yet. Psychological research on emotional disengagement shows that humans pull back internally first before they can articulate why. This is especially true in romantic attraction, where feelings are intuitive rather than logical. So when you ask her, "Is everything okay?" and she says, "Yeah, I'm fine," she might actually believe that in that moment. But her nervous system already knows something her mouth hasn't caught up to yet. Now here's where things turn controversial. Most men assume enthusiasm disappears because another man appeared, she got bored. She lost feelings randomly. But in reality, enthusiasm usually fades when the emotional dynamic stops stimulating her sense of self. Not drama, not chaos, stimulation. That stimulation often comes from feeling seen without being chased, emotional tension, not emotional pressure, respect for a man's groundedness, not his over-explaining. When that balance shifts, when she feels she's being managed, pursued for validation, or emotionally leaned on, her enthusiasm doesn't explode. It evaporates. And here's the hardest part for men to hear. She may still like you, she may still care, but enthusiasm is not powered by care. It's powered by how she feels when she's around you. If her energy has changed, it's not because you weren't enough. It's because the dynamic stopped feeding attraction. And until men learn to read energy instead of words, this pattern will keep repeating, quietly, painfully, and confusingly. 2. The comfort trap. Why stability can kill desire. Let me ask you something gently, but honestly. Have you ever thought, I'm doing everything right, I'm consistent, I'm available, I don't play games, why does she seem less excited? This is where many men get blindsided, because what men often label as being safe, reliable, and stable, a woman's psychology can sometimes experience as predictable, emotionally flat, or unstimulating, if it's not balanced correctly. And before you react, stay with me. This is not an attack on stability. It's an explanation of how attraction actually works. Psychologically speaking, attraction thrives on a balance between security and uncertainty. Research on dopamine and romantic attachment shows that novelty, challenge, and emotional contrast activate desire far more than constant reassurance ever does. So when a man becomes entirely predictable, not grounded, but overly available, something subtle happens. She stops wondering. And when curiosity dies, enthusiasm follows. Here's the controversial part most people avoid saying out loud. A woman doesn't lose enthusiasm because you became stable. She loses enthusiasm because you stopped being emotionally self-directed. If your mood depends on her responses, if your confidence rises and falls based on her attention, if your energy shifts every time she pulls back, she feels it. Instantly, not logically, nervously. Her body reads it as pressure, even if you never intend it that way. And pressure, even quiet pressure, kills attraction faster than conflict ever could. This is why some men say, "I gave her everything and she still pulled away." What they don't realize is that they gave too much emotional access and too little independent presence. You became easy to read, easy to predict, easy to emotionally place. And once a woman feels she has fully figured you out, without resistance or polarity, her enthusiasm doesn't grow, it plateaus, then fades. And here's the painful irony. Men often respond to fading enthusiasm by becoming more comforting, more explaining, more checking in, more reassurance, which deepens the comfort trap. From a psychological standpoint, desire isn't built on comfort alone. It's built on contrast, closeness and space availability and self-containment, care and emotional independence. When those contrasts disappear, attraction doesn't collapse dramatically. It slowly goes quiet. And that's why this phase is so confusing for men. There's no fight, no obvious problem, just a woman who feels different, less expressive, less responsive, less emotionally charged. And the worst mistake men make here is assuming they need to do more. Often, the solution isn't effort. It's recentering, reclaiming your direction, your emotional steadiness, your sense of self that exists whether she leans in or not. Because enthusiasm isn't something you demand or earn through effort. It's something that emerges when a woman feels both safe and stimulated in your presence. 3. She didn't lose interest in you. She lost respect. Let's slow this down, because this part is uncomfortable, but necessary. When men hear that a woman has lost interest, they usually assume it's emotional, that she stopped feeling something. But in many cases, what actually disappeared first was respect. And no, I don't mean disrespect in a loud, insulting way. I mean the quiet psychological shift where she stops seeing you as emotionally solid. Here's the criticism men rarely hear clearly. A woman doesn't lose enthusiasm because you made mistakes. She loses it when you stop owning your emotional state, when you begin outsourcing your confidence to her reactions, when you look to her moods to decide how you feel about yourself, when you subtly ask, through tone, timing, or energy, for reassurance instead of presence. Psychology is very clear on this. Attraction depends heavily on perceived emotional self-regulation. When one partner starts leaning on the other to stabilize their self-worth, the dynamic tilts, and women feel this shift deeply, not because they're cruel, but because their nervous system is wired to assess strength through consistency, not words. Here's a hard truth said calmly. When you over-explain yourself, over-defend your intentions, or over-apologize for existing, you don't come across as kind. You come across as unsure of your own value. And enthusiasm cannot survive in a dynamic where a woman feels she has to emotionally hold you. Now listen carefully. This is not about being cold, dominant, or emotionally closed. It's about containment. A man who can feel anxiety without projecting it, disappointment without collapsing, uncertainty without pleading for validation. That steadiness creates safety and attraction. But when a man constantly seeks clarity, reassurance, or confirmation that he's still wanted, something subtle happens in her mind. She stops leaning toward you and starts leaning away to breathe. And here's where men often misunderstand women completely. She may still care, she may still be kind, she may still try, but internally, she's adjusting her expectations downward. She's no longer curious about you. She's managing the interaction. That's the moment enthusiasm quietly dies. So here's the wake-up call. Delivered without judgment. If you notice a woman pulling back, the solution is rarely to convince her. It's to reclaim your center. Ask yourself, am I grounded in my own direction right now? Do I feel solid even if her energy changes? Am I showing up from choice or from fear of loss? Because the moment a woman senses that you would still be okay without her validation, something shifts, respect stabilizes, tension returns, enthusiasm has room to breathe again, and if it doesn't, at least you walk away intact, not fragmented. That alone changes everything. 4. Why trying harder pushes her further away. This is where many men unintentionally lose the dynamic completely, while believing they're doing the right thing. Because when a woman's enthusiasm starts to fade, a man's instinct is almost always the same. Try harder. More messages, more reassurance, more emotional availability, more explanations about intentions, feelings, commitment. From the outside, this looks caring. From a psychological perspective, it often feels like pressure. And here's the paradox most men aren't prepared for. Attraction does not grow under emotional pressure. Even gentle pressure, it shrinks. Research in relational psychology shows that desire is closely tied to autonomy. When one person feels emotionally crowded, even subtly, their nervous system seeks distance to restore balance. So when you notice her pulling back and respond by closing the gap faster, you trigger the opposite response. She doesn't feel pursued, she feels compressed. Now listen carefully, because this is important. Most women don't consciously think, he's trying too hard. What they feel is, I don't have room to breathe in this dynamic. And the moment breathing becomes an issue, enthusiasm disappears. This is why men often say, I was being open, I was communicating, I was honest. And yet, she grew colder. Because honesty without self-regulation turns into emotional leakage. Every extra message carries weight. Every check-in carries expectation. Every reassurance request carries need. Even if you never say it out loud, her body reads it. And instead of feeling chosen, she feels responsible. Here's the controversial truth said calmly. A woman's attraction rarely returns because a man explains himself better. It returns when his presence becomes lighter, less emotional chasing, more emotional steadiness, less proving, more grounded silence, not punishment, not withdrawal, not manipulation, just containment. The ability to say internally, I'm okay even if this doesn't work out. That energy is felt immediately, and ironically, that's when women often lean back in, because now the interaction isn't about managing your emotions, it's about connection again. Trying harder feels logical, but attraction isn't logical. It's responsive, and when you stop pushing against her pullback, you give the dynamic room to rebalance, or reveal the truth. Both outcomes are power. 5. The moment she stops trying to be understood. This is the stage most men don't recognize until it's already too late. Because when a woman truly loses enthusiasm, she doesn't argue more, she argues less. She stops correcting you, stops explaining herself, stops trying to make you understand how she feels. And this is where men get it wrong. They think, things are calmer now. She's not complaining anymore. Maybe it fixed itself. But psychologically, this is often the final shift. When a woman is still emotionally invested, she tries to be understood. She clarifies, she pushes back, she expresses frustration. Those behaviors mean she still cares about the outcome. The moment she stops doing that, something important has happened internally. She's no longer trying to change the dynamic, she's adjusting herself to it. Research on emotional disengagement shows that people mentally exit relationships before they physically leave them. They conserve energy by lowering expectations, not by confronting problems. So when her enthusiasm is gone, what you're seeing is not anger, it's acceptance. And acceptance is far more dangerous to attraction than conflict. Here's the controversial part said gently. When a woman stops trying to be understood by you, she has already begun to detach emotionally. She's not cold, she's not heartless, she's protecting her peace, she still shows up, she still responds. But the emotional effort, the part that created warmth and enthusiasm, is no longer there. And here's the part men need to hear without defensiveness. At this stage, words rarely fix things. Not because you're incapable, but because the dynamic has already taught her what to expect. The only thing that can interrupt this pattern is a change in presence, not persuasion. A man who suddenly becomes grounded, self-contained, emotionally calm without pulling away, present without needing to be chosen. Sometimes that shift reopens curiosity, sometimes it doesn't. But either way, it restores dignity and clarity, because enthusiasm cannot be negotiated, it can only be invited. And if she doesn't respond, the loss is not your worth, it's the mismatch. The truth most men don't want to hear. Let me end this in a way that might bother you, but only because it's honest. When a woman loses enthusiasm for you, it's rarely because you weren't good enough. It's because you stopped being a man she could emotionally respond to. And that's not an insult. It's a responsibility. Here's the controversial truth most men aren't taught. A woman's enthusiasm is not something you earn by being nicer, more available, or more accommodating. It's a reaction to how grounded, self-directed, and emotionally contained you are in your own life. The moment your identity revolves around keeping her interested, the moment your confidence depends on her reassurance, the moment your peace rises and falls based on her mood, you quietly hand her a burden she never asked to carry, and women don't resent men for this. They disengage, not because they're cruel, but because attraction cannot survive obligation. So if you've experienced this before, don't ask, why do women always lose interest? Ask instead, who was I becoming in that dynamic? Was I showing up from wholeness or fear? Was I leading my life or reacting to her attention? This is not about blame, it's about awakening. Because the moment you stop chasing enthusiasm and start embodying stability with self-respect, something powerful happens, whether with her or the next woman. And I want to hear from you. If you've ever felt a woman slowly pull away without explanation, comment your experience below. I read them, I respond when I can, and yes, I reach out, not to judge, but to help you see what you couldn't see while you were inside it. Because understanding this changes how you show up, not just in dating, but in life. And that's where real confidence begins.